Hey everyone, my name is Alec.
My name is Alex.
And we've got some breaking news. First of all, welcome to our new fantasy football channel.
Good
We
to
have
have you.
moved from the specific Merciless Walrus one, so there will be strictly gameplay and nonsense on there. And for all of you who are mainly just looking for fantasy football, this is your new home. Consider this your abode, your place of happiness on the internet.
Buy a rug.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to leave and have a little comment structure that you want to, if you want to send us letters or anything,
get a
or just tweet at us,
Got some wood.
Yeah, but in any case, welcome to welcome to the new channel. Set up your ottoman because this is going to be a cozy season.
This is a big channel called About Ottomans. We're huge on Ottomans here at the
big fans.
Alex Fantasy Show.
Anyway, so before we get into our draft strategy for 2014, there's some breaking news.
Breaking news: Joel Embiid acknowledges that these girls ain't loyal. So, for those of you who have a Twitter, probably most of you, and would like another great Twitter account to follow, Joel Embiid, first-round draft pick of the 76ers this year. Wonderful on Twitter. So anyway,
his Twitter career will rival his NBA career without a doubt.
You've probably seen the thing he did with Kim Kardashian.
And if you didn't,
please
just Google it. Joel Embiid is tremendous. I love him as a person.
So anyway, what happened is Chandler Parsons, former Houston Rocket, current Dallas Maverick, apparently was tweeting a girl and gave her his phone number and said, shoot me a text. And the girl tweeted a screen cap of the conversation and said, nah, Chandler Parsons, I'm not doing it.
Chandler Parsons, get out of my DMs.
Yeah, so she froze Chandler Parsons off. So Joel Embiid took to Twitter to said, I've been saying that. Never slide in anyone's DMs.
He's learned the mistake himself.
Sorry it had to be you, Chandler Parsons. These girls ain't loyal.
These girls ain't loyal. He's right. Joel Embiid bringing the truth.
Yeah.
Just like us.
Yeah.
We try to bring the truth to you, the people of the Alec and Alex Fantasy Show, podcast, experience, whatever. We want to call it the Alec and Alex Fantasy Experience this year.
Oh, wow. I actually like that a whole lot.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's go with it. The Alec and Alex Fantasy Experience, renamed starting as of right now in this video.
The Experience, for sure.
So this video is a little different than our other preseason videos. We are going to essentially go over all of the tough decisions you might have to make in a draft without knowing specifically where you are.
Right.
We're going to start by covering the first round. And we think there are really three places in the first round where you could be drafting, and your decision as far as who you will pick is going to vary based on where you are there. We're also just going to quickly go by position where you need to start looking for each position and the latest you can start to look as well.
Important. Very important.
And then we're going to, we're going to go over some high variance players and overall what you should do with high variance draft picks.
Right.
Now, what we mean by high variance are guys who could really just totally crap the bed and have a bad season, or they could do much better than they're currently projected.
Yeah.
And is that someone at the door, or is that Ginger?
That's the dog.
Yeah. The hound is going crazy. I think we're all good.
She's okay. Ginger, behave yourself.
Yeah, that's fine. If she wants to get on the camera, I can't blame her.
No.
Everyone wants their 5 seconds of fame.
She was made for the camera.
Yeah, it's 15 seconds, man.
That's okay.
15 seconds or 15 minutes?
I think it's 15 minutes, but she'd probably only have about 15
I think
seconds.
Kanye said the 15 seconds, and that's why I get confused.
What song is that from?
That's from the one with Jay-Z where he talks for 5 minutes.
Oh,
on
Last Call?
Yeah, he says... Anyway, so to start off... Assuming you are in a 12-team league, there are 3 places where you can draft. You can be in the top 3, you can be in the 4 to 10 range, or you can be 11 to 12. Now, if you're in the top 3, your life is easy.
I think the most interesting draft is not in the top 3. The easiest draft is in the top 3.
Yes.
Top 3, you take what you get.
There are 3 guys who are clearly the top 3 and they're above everyone else, which is Jamal Charles, LaShawn McCoy, and Adrian Peterson. We have them in that order. A lot of people have that order kind of mixed up, and that's because all of them should be elite fantasy options.
Right.
None of them are known to be injury issues. Jamal Charles had his one bigger injury, but that was more so...
That was, like, an ACL that can happen. It's not like a nagging, lingering sort of thing like you'd see with a guy, I don't know, who's a guy...
Julio Jones.
Yeah, perfect. Julio Jones.
Right. And Adrian Peterson, same thing. Like, he might occasionally get nicked up or dinged up, but again, he's had a major injury, but other than that, we expect him to be healthy.
And that could happen to anyone.
Yes. I mean, for all we know, this will be the year LaShawn McCoy gets his turn at the ACL bug.
As much as you'd hate to see that happen, it could happen, yeah.
Long story short, all of them have an equal chance of being injured, more or less.
Yep, and if you have the number one pick, we like Jamal Charles, other people like Adrian Peterson, whatever.
Long story short, you take your favorite player of those three, but you're happy with whatever one of those
And if
you
you're
get.
number three, the choice is made for you.
Exactly. Or even if, that's exactly it. And if you happen to be number 4 and someone took, I don't know, Marshawn Lynch or Matt Forte or Peyton Manning in the top 3, okay, you should still take one of those 3 guys.
Take a top 3 guy.
Yes. So that's where we stand on the top 3, and again, that could stretch to number 4 and maybe even 5, depending on your draft.
Yeah. Lynch went early in my draft, friend. Somebody took Lynch number 1 overall.
And after his year last year, I could see Peyton Manning maybe going third in a draft.
Yeah.
So a lot of weird things can happen. Those are our top 3. Those, if you worship us, much like I worship the god of Zach Stacy and his shoulders.
And his shoulders that go on for... Zach Stacy's shoulders, they're like, all right, here. They're about as long as our shoulders right now.
Zach Stacy would start here and end here.
Yeah, it's very
crazy.
Very amazing.
Love him.
He's also like our height, but he also weighs like 200.
Unbelievable. Nonetheless, so that's our top 3. Moving on to 4 to 10. This is essentially the range, and you can kind of figure this out for yourself, but you want, again, it's the first round. You want to get someone who you hopefully will play minimum 12 games.
Yeah.
So we would not put, let's say, Arian Foster or DeMarco Murray quite in this range.
Definitely not DeMarco.
Because Marshawn Lynch, Matt Forte, Eddie Lacy, just as examples, and Calvin Johnson as well.
And,
those are guys you are a lot more confident will play the same number of games. And let's be serious, if DeMarco Murray and Eddie Lacy play the same number of games, they probably have similar stats. Right. The thing is, we expect Eddie Lacy to play more games on average.
The thing with these picks, your first round pick, I don't necessarily think you need to get the best player on the board. You need to get a guy who will produce for you the entire year. Yeah. Because I've seen with my own fantasy teams that the years that I get a lot out of my first round pick are generally the years I'm in, in the finals or in the semifinals, stuff like that. So get a guy who produces, And we'll get into high variance players later, but the first round's not really the place to get a high variance guy.
That said, so we've kind of figured it that there are 10 safe picks in this year. Technically, we have Peyton Manning in that 10. We don't like picking him that early just because you have to sacrifice getting one of these other guys.
Not great value, sure.
Although, if you get to like number 9, number 10, and your options are dwindling, you can start to look at Peyton, no question.
He will be good for you.
11 and 12
hard picks.
It's a really crappy place to draft.
We were working
really, it's like 11
mock last night, and it was hard. What did you have, the 11th pick?
I had the 11th pick, and again, my options were guys like Arian Foster, DeMarco Murray. Obviously, Peyton was off the board.
Was gone.
Jimmy Graham
was off the board.
He was off the board. He's
who we really like in the 4 to 10 range.
Jimmy Graham's another guy who's in the 4 to 10 range because, again, he's going to produce. We expect him to play.
And he's so much more valuable than...
He's
maybe not the number 2 tight end, but the top 3, 4 tight ends are so much more valuable.
He plays 16 games. He will, worst case scenario, be the number 3 tight end.
You love that. Yeah, you love really solid production there.
So, and that's not something you can say about anyone, really any of the running backs. You can't say that. Now, the thing is, tight ends are just less valuable, which is why Jimmy Graham's lower. But, so, back to the 11 to 12. This is where you might have to look at a bit of a riskier guy like a DeMarco Murray, where he's got a lot of the same potential, but he's a bit less of a sure thing as far as playing.
I mean, he's shown himself to be a great player. Totally worthy of that pick solely on merit.
However, thing is, you don't have, like, the next best option as far as a surefire guy that's going to play 16 games. Who's probably the next guy on that? Let's take a quick
maybe Zach
look.
Stacy? Do you look at Zach Stacy
that
early? Do you look at
I
Doug,
definitely
Doug
think
Martin, maybe? Will he be
exactly.
gone by then?
So
Le'Veon Bell?
yeah, so perfect example. Le'Veon Bell is a great example of a guy you could look at the 11 to 12 pick, where you would choose between DeMarco Murray and him, and it's a bad choice because you either have to take the risk and go with, again, Arian Foster will sometimes be off the board by this pick, sometimes he won't.
Right. You got him there last night.
I got him at 11 last night, but that's not going to happen every time. And the thing is, you're either going with the risky guy or a surefire guy that's just clearly a lower level. So, personally, we think guys like DeMarco and, again, Foster, that's where we'd start to pick them, because if there's a guy who you assume is going to be healthier or has a better track record that is as good, you almost always want to go with them in these first 3 rounds. Because you really need unless you've got a guy who is just, he really slipped and he has the chance to be a top 5 at his position. Unless that's the case, you really want to avoid risky guys in the first 3 rounds, because one injury to a top 3 player on your team
can
in
big trouble.
Really derail your season.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about fantasy football a little differently lately, in the sense that you're not trying to get the most points every week. Well, you are trying to get the most points every week, but if you could just get to a certain number of points every week. So, like, if you could average 95 points.
In a 12-team league, standard scoring,
you're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And you look at it that way, and then you look at, like, how are you going to get to 95 points every week?
Definitely, hopefully you're going to get a surefire thing here. If not, I think Arian Foster and DeMarco Murray, once again, are your best options. And that's where we would start to look at them, because they are riskier than some of the other guys on the board. Now we're just going to go quickly position by position, where we think you should be looking at guys, what kind of depth you want, so on and so forth. We're going to start off with the running backs, because they should be the first thing you look at, because everyone generally needs 2. Some leagues are going to 1 running back, which I don't hate, but I haven't personally tried it out, so I can't say one way or the other.
It really changes how drafting goes.
Yeah.
So really make sure you know who you're starting in your league.
We're assuming in this discussion that you start 2 running backs and a flex for this discussion. And obviously, if you have any questions about your particular league, feel free to hit a brother up, and I'll help you out. But running backs, you need to look at them first, because there are generally only 30, maybe 40 viable running backs in the NFL, and that's a stretch. When I say 30 to 40 viable ones, we're considering Ahmad Bradshaw to be viable. We're considering Sean Green to be viable, and those aren't guys you want starting for your fantasy team, but those are guys that theoretically someone in your league will have to.
Yeah, they'll be owned. Yeah,
they'll definitely be owned.
And they might be more than flexes.
Yes.
You generally don't want to be the guy who has them as more than a flex.
So, unless you're going to get Calvin Johnson, and Calvin Johnson I think you can start to look at as early as the 5th pick, depending on where you look on Marshawn Lynch and Eddie Lacy.
Look, I mean, if Eddie Lacy's gone, if Marshawn Lynch is gone, and you're...
Well, then Matt Forte is available. So, I guess maybe Calvin Johnson, you start to look at him at the 6th.
But I think after all of those guys, Calvin Johnson's probably the best pick, right?
Absolutely. So, Calvin Johnson is the one guy where if you're in the first round... you could look at him, and obviously Peyton and Jimmy Graham. So Jimmy Graham as well. Once you get to like the 9th pick, I think
he's got to go.
He's excellent. But other than that, getting an elite running back early is so valuable, because the later you go, the thinner and thinner the running backs start to become, and the more receivers and quarterbacks in particular are available. Like, there are more good quarterbacks than teams can start. If you go to our quarterback video, which if it's not up already, will be up soon, we think there are 15 startable quarterbacks this year. With Jay Cutler kind of marking the bottom of that.
With a cigarette in hand.
With smoking Jay. So, whereas running backs, much more scarce, but a very important part of your team, and a lot of the consistency that you'll have is the fact that you'll have a running back who gets 80 yards a game. And not having that aspect can be brutal. When do you think you have to start looking at your second running back, though?
That's an interesting point, because you can get a second receiver. You can get a second receiver in the 4th round, in the 5th round.
I think you can get a second receiver as late as the 6th.
Yeah, and I think you need your second running back. Would you say by the 5th?
I would say that. Again, the thing is, after the 5th round, the Chris Johnsons and Rashad Jennings of the NFL are gone.
And those guys are your number 2 running backs.
Those are the definition of a decent but not elite number 2 back. And once those guys are gone, now you're at a place where you've got to look at Pierre Thomas as your number 2 running back.
Which is a problem because the Saints have like 4 running backs.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean,
guys who are in timeshares, guys who are not proven. I mean, a handcuff maybe. Like you've got to have your second running back before Pierre Thomas goes off the board.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when Chris Johnson and Rashad Jennings, again, just as like a rough range, when guys like that, of that caliber, start to go, if you don't already have a second back, your next pick should be one, unless there's like someone who really fell that you can't resist.
Yeah, I agree. That's absolutely
so that's what we would say as far as running backs. As far as bench running backs, that's not really as relevant because there's always like a rookie running back who happens to overperform.
Your Carlos Hyde, your Terrence West, guys who are interesting, guys with upside.
Yeah, there are guys who will slip to the really late rounds that might happen to be good, or even guys who are on waivers that get off to a hot start that you can pick up.
I really don't know. Running back depth, I think, is somewhat overrated.
Yeah.
Because, why do you need a third running back who's Sean Green?
Exactly.
He's not really going to contribute for your team.
So the moral of the story here is that your top 2 running backs should be one of your priorities.
Yep.
And unlike receivers and quarterbacks, you can't delay too long. If you see an opportunity to get one at a good value, you need to pounce on it, like a puma on like a medium-sized rabbit.
Good.
Nonetheless, moving on to quarterbacks. So as we said, Peyton Manning's the only one who you can take in the first. We think that if Aaron Rodgers falls to the later half of the second round, you're pretty excited to take him.
I mean, if you got, like, let's say, Adrian Peterson and then you swing back and get Aaron Rodgers, if that somehow happens for you, that's great. I mean, that's perfect.
Yeah. I would avoid Peyton, and if you think that quarterbacks aren't because sometimes there will be like a trend within a draft.
Yeah.
Like people will just kind of not be taking quarterbacks.
Sure.
And like Peyton won't be taken till like the 12th. That's actually pretty, like the 10th maybe.
That happens. It certainly happened. On my draft, I know people started taking quarterbacks, I think, a little too early.
Yeah.
That can happen too.
But what you can also see is kind of like a pack mentality.
Yeah.
Like 2 straight guys will take a quarterback, and you'll have people who are like, oh my God, all the quarterbacks are going. I have to take one now.
All the quarterbacks are gone because Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning.
Yes. So that said, that's not actually the case. If you see people starting to take quarterbacks, Matt Ryan is available as late as the 8th or 9th round.
Russell
Tony
Wilson's
Romo.
there too.
Yeah.
They're all
so
there. They'll be fine.
We think that if you have an opportunity to get a quarterback at a good value, like again, Peyton Manning, maybe even early second round, I'd consider him because we like Aaron Rodgers more anyway, so it doesn't make sense to take.
And Drew Brees again is like 3rd round, and he's
potentially
just as good as both of them.
So, but that said, if you know you can get Matt Ryan in the 8th or 9th, or Tony Romo in the 10th or 11th, I don't see why you would sacrifice getting a solid number 2 back. When the downgraded quarterback, you're going to have less consistency.
Yeah. I mean, that is honestly, like, when I look around at rosters in leagues I'm in and, other leagues, I think that's, like, the weakest part of most teams, the number 2 back. So that's somewhere you need to make sure you can get a guy who can contribute to your team.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Wide receivers, much like quarterbacks, tend to stay pretty deep.
Yeah.
Towards the end of drafts. That's because most teams have 2 to 3 viable receivers.
Absolutely.
Unless you're the Jets, then you have none. Eric Decker's half a viable receiver.
So sad.
Fantasy-wise.
So
sad. Such a fall from grace.
Who is their number 2? Is it Curly?
Curly or David Nelson, I'd imagine. Probably Curly. Maybe even Jason Morrow. I don't know.
Jason Morrow. We love Jason. So receivers are deeper. And again, mock drafts are the most important things you can do, but you will realize receivers are deeper. You can get a guy like Mike Evans, who's the clear number 2 in Tampa Bay, with a lot of upside and a pretty good system to, earn some points somewhere like the 11th round.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of high upside receivers. Again, we'll talk about that later. We keep saying that. But you would say you don't need to take your first receiver until, I'd say, the 4th round.
Yeah.
If you went, like, maybe running back, tight end, that's totally fine. I would say by the 4th, maybe even the 5th.
Who do you think you could get as a receiver in the 4th round? Do you think you'd maybe have Victor Cruz?
Well, let me tell. Yeah, I think Victor Cruz is actually very realistic in the 4th round. Just looking at ESPN's rankings, which we don't necessarily agree with, but just as a baseline, because this is like a lot of people use lists along these lines. So
Keenan Allen, maybe?
Deshaun Jackson, maybe.
Sure. Yeah.
Keenan Allen might be a stretch, but yeah, those are guys you can get in the 4th round, and they are legitimate wide receiver ones.
Yeah, and you'll have 2 loaded running backs in that case.
So if you see a Brandon Marshall or a Dez or an AJ Green starting to slip, or even Calvin Johnson once you get to the second half of the 1st round, yes, they're good value, and you should take them. But don't feel pressured to take a receiver. If the 3rd round comes and you're like, oh my God, I don't have a receiver, that's fine. Don't panic.
Yeah, your receiver slots will fill up more slowly than your running back slots. That's just how it works. And you need to understand that about your team, and you need to understand at what points in the draft you should get worried that you don't have certain players.
Yeah. Tight ends are really weird because it's all just based on, like, you don't need to take one until really even like the 8th round.
Yeah, if you're
not
not getting a tight end in the first 4 rounds, then you're not getting one until the 8th.
Greg Olsen probably goes in like the 8th or 9th.
Yeah,
anyway.
You got him right around the 100th pick last
I got Greg Olsen on the 107th pick in my draft last night.
And Greg Olsen
he's a starting tight end.
He's probably like the 5th or 6th ranked tight end in the entire league, right?
He's high up on as far as receiving options on his team.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for sure. But then again, if you see Jimmy Graham available at the 10th or 11th pick, you take him. So tight ends are just like, if you're kind of going along the first 5 or 6 rounds and you see someone who's slipping, take them. Otherwise, hold off, get the relevant players. Where do you take a defense other than Seattle?
See, I don't necessarily know about defenses. I tend to think with the defense that you'd go later rather than earlier. That tends to be my thinking, because I think you can always find a defense that can at least play well for you for a couple weeks, if not for the whole season. I remember I got Kansas City off waivers last year, and defenses are kind of notoriously hard to predict, right? We know Seattle's going to be good. We know San Francisco is probably going to be good, but I don't know. What defense would you be really comfortable with besides Seattle?
None.
Yeah,
Seattle
I agree.
And I guess maybe New England are the only ones that right now I can confidently say will also be top 10 next year.
Yeah, that's true.
But other than that, yeah, defenses are a crapshoot. It's mainly going to be based on turnovers anyway.
Yeah,
the teams that get more turnover, and we don't know.
That's unpredictable. That's notoriously unpredictable.
But yes, if there is a team that is known for getting more turnovers or a large number of sacks, you value them a little more than just the straight up lockdown ones necessarily. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Kickers, last 2 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, I see people reaching for kickers, and that doesn't make any sense because kickers, again, are unpredictable, right?
Yeah.
You don't know who you're going to get.
If there's a certain one you've got your eye on, you get them in the 2nd to last round. Otherwise, you just get a decent one.
Look at how NFL teams deal with kickers. They'll ride a guy, and then if he's not playing well, they'll cut him and sign somebody off the street.
It's not even just that. Look at Mason Crosby, who went from being a top 3 kicker one year to then just totally falling apart.
Right. So it's hard to predict, and there are going to be people who
David Akers as well.
Exactly. Yeah,
totally fell from glory.
That's very true.
Could happen to any of the kickers.
There are going to be people in your draft who 2 rounds before the end are going to be like, oh, there's no one left. I can't pick anyone. There's no one good. I'll just start taking my kicker.
Yeah.
Don't be that guy.
Please don't. To save yourself the embarrassment.
Don't be that guy.
And last but not least, we've been hyping this part up for far too long. We've got our high variance picks and what we think you should do. Now, we've already hinted at this. If you think a guy has a high ceiling but also a really low floor,
could get injured, sure.
You want to hold off until the 4th or 5th round. And again, the top 3 rounds is really where you want to nail all of your picks. Because if you can do that, you're in a great position.
Yeah, I mean, look at the team that won last year in your league and figure out who they took in their first 3 rounds. Chances are there are guys who stayed healthy. And guys who produced the whole year.
Yeah, exactly. So, as far as guys, there are really 2 categories of high variance, and we've got some examples that are interesting. So, like a CJ Spiller. is the classic high variance example.
He really is.
He's high variance for 2 reasons.
For a number of reasons, exactly.
Yeah. We don't know if he's any good. We don't know if Fred Jackson is just going to be better anyway.
Right.
We don't know if he's healthy.
Right. We know CJ Spiller had a high ankle sprain last year, so we know that could have hurt him through the year. But then before he got the ankle sprain, he wasn't really that good anyway.
Yeah, he had a great year the year before, but CJ Spiller's a weird one. That said, you've got guys like Rob Gronkowski, Percy Harvin. Now you're looking at the 4th and 5th round, and the later you go, the more intriguing these high variance guys become, because you sacrifice less to take that risk.
Absolutely.
Whereas you take CJ Spiller, by taking the risk on him, yeah, he could have a great season, but you're missing out on a guy who you know will have a good season.
Where do you think the earliest you would draft CJ Spiller is? Do you think like the 5th round?
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. And even in the 5th round, you'd be able to get like, I don't know, who would be, probably get Roddy White in the 5th round, right?
Roddy White, definitely Marcus Colston.
Oh, absolutely.
He goes even later than that.
Yeah, so yeah. So yeah, you got to be careful with the guy like CJ Spiller. Know the risk. Know the risk for every guy you're thinking about drafting.
Then, again, we said Rob Gronkowski and Percy Harvin. Those are guys where their upside is so big that you can afford to take them in the 4th and 5th as opposed to really holding off. But then you've got guys like Brandon Cooks, the new receiver on New Orleans, or Hakeem Nicks, who went to Indy, who are going pretty late. Cooks I've seen go as high as the 8th round, but that's really the highest he's going to go.
And I think personally that's too high.
Yeah. And Hakeem Nicks probably the 10th, 11th.
Yeah. People forget about Hakeem Nicks.
And those are guys where, they might not have great seasons. Both are in pretty crowded offenses. But both also have great quarterbacks and have pretty unique talents.
Right.
And in one case, huge hands.
Really huge hands. Yeah, that's true. Hakeem Nicks got big hands. Brandon Cooks has got big speed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, I mean, these are guys that you want to take a chance on late in the year because, Darren Sproles
late in the draft.
Late in the draft. Darren Sproles is a guy who, he's not on the Saints anymore, so they're going to need to replace those yards and they're going to need to replace those snaps somehow, right? At least you have to think they would. Yeah,
and one or two other guys we got, Monte Ball, we think he's going a little high where most people are drafting him because, again, we haven't seen Monte Ball play a good NFL game yet.
Remember, this was supposed to be what he was going to do last year.
And he lost the job.
Right, he lost the job to Noshan Moreno, who now has totally fallen off the fantasy radar when he's moved to a team that's not as good as Denver.
Yeah. So Monte Ball, again, I think he's going too high for a guy of such risk. On the other hand, Jeremy Maclin is not going nearly as high, and he's a guy where if Nick Foles is even 90% of what he was last year, Jeremy Maclin should be insane.
That's right. Yeah, and they're going to have to fill Deshaun Jackson, the void that Deshaun Jackson has left in Philly. And Macklin's a talented guy, and he's been good his whole career. It's just, again, he has some injury problems, and we'll see how he works in that offense. He's certainly not the same sort of receiver as Deshaun Jackson,
but he's
similarly talented. Yeah.
Anyway, guys, those are our key high variance players, and just a good baseline. If you look at a guy and you say, I don't know if he's going to be good or not, not just wait, but look at the guys around him and say, all right, are these guys surefire things, and are they going to produce similar numbers if they play the same number of games?
Look into guys' injury history. Like a guy like Roddy White, for instance, who had a really injury-riddled season last year was mostly because of one injury, a high ankle sprain, which is something you'll heal from, and he could potentially be the old Roddy White this year.
Yeah,
so look into something like that. A guy like Reggie Wayne tore his ACL. Is that an injury that he could come back from as well as Roddy White could? That's something you'll have to weigh on your own,
For sure. So do your own research. Again, feel free to hit us up in the comment section or on Twitter, and I don't have much else to say. Do you?
No. Good luck.
Good luck. We'll see you next time with, I believe, our quarterback rankings.
Quarterback rankings.
Quarterback rankings. Awesome. See you next time.